Hi, good evening, and welcome to Economic Empowerment Television with the YWCA of Metropolitan Chicago. I'm your host, Vince Williams, the Vice President of Economic Empowerment for the YWCA of Metropolitan Chicago and the Director of their Small Business Development Center. Tonight on Economic Empowerment Television, I'd love to welcome Regan Sonnabend, the Vice President of Marketing for the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago, as well as the Director of the YWCA's initiative for the 2020 census. And so this evening, she's going to be sharing with us some of the great things that she has working on to make sure that during this particular year of the census count, that we as the YWCA is really looking to partner and make a difference in those capacities. And I wanted to still keep you abreast of some of the great other things and initiatives that the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago is doing. As you know, you can always contact us via our website at www.ywcametropolitanchicago.org. And from there, you'll be able to navigate some of the various things that we do at the organization. For example, you can find out about us. You can go into our work, how we help or how to help with the organization, information about our Women's Health Exchange, and of course our Y Shop, where you can find out more information about the YWCA products and services and some of the things that we offer there. In addition to the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago's website, I'd really love to direct your attention to, if I can get back to that site there, more information about our Economic Empowerment Institute and some of the things that we do there. And so if you were to go to our work, and you'll see on the left-hand side there where it says Economic Empowerment Services. Click on that, and that'll tell you about all of the other services that we offer. And for example, we have our career services that focuses on finding pipelines of talent for your organization, our Construct program that talks more about some of the initiatives we have with the local and construction industry, where we will work with individuals to teach them to be engaged in that line of work. We have our digital literacy program, our Drive to Thrive with Uber, our 50 plus that works with those that are 50 and older and teaching them resume skills and resume building, as well as our financial education and literacy, and of course our Small Business Development Center, which we're really proud to be a part of that particular network here in the state of Illinois. And most recently, we have formed our Transportation, Distribution, and Logistics program that works with youth between the ages of 18 to 24 to get them involved in the Transportation, Distribution, and Logistics program. So with that, I again would love to welcome Regan Sonnabend to the YWCA Economic Empowerment Television program. And if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your role at the YWCA and then how it folds into the new initiative that includes the 2020 census, which I see some of the items we have here.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. And one small thing, I just wanted to make sure people can find us. The website is ywcachicago.org, so there's no metropolitan in the website address. So just wanted to make sure people are able to find us. And
I appreciate that.
I've been delighted to join the team back around Thanksgiving, and I'll be serving as our Census Project Director. We've got quite a bit of work we're doing around the census. And in addition to that, once that role is complete, my permanent position will be Vice President of Marketing and Communications. So really excited to be a part of many of the things that are already being undertaken and some new things that are coming as we speak. So lots of exciting things going on.
Absolutely. That's incredible. So I know that the census is taken every 10 years. And with the YWCA being one of the regional intermediaries for this particular program, it's looking to make sure that certain areas, especially the communities that we serve, are being counted. Can you dive a little bit more for the listening and for the viewing audience out there as to why it's really important that they are counted, these particular communities are counted, and what that actually leads to?
Absolutely. There are quite a few different hard-to-count populations. Some of them are identified geographically, others demographically. So there's quite a few. Some of the areas that we serve on the south side, on the west side, are some that have been historically undercounted in the 2010 census and going back. So both the city and the state as well as the Census Bureau have live heat maps of what's going on with the counting when it starts taking place. So that's coming up very soon, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
Yeah.
So you've got geographic areas that are hard to count, but you've also got specific populations that are hard to count. They include everything from children under the age of 5 to the elderly, young and mobile. College students are a perfect example, like where should they be counted?
Yeah.
Snowbirds are another example. People for whom English is not their first language is another. And then we have 2 specific populations that we're working on alongside IDHS for our grant through the state, and that's the LGBTQ plus population as well as those experiencing homelessness. So
that's phenomenal.
yeah,
Those are
there's a
some
lot of work to be
outstanding
done out
initiatives.
there.
Yeah, absolutely.
As far as the impact, you asked and started with that, the impact is actually tremendous. So there are a lot of different ways that census data is used. A big part of that is for funding for federal programs, for more than 50 different federal programs that matter most to almost everyone. Things from education to transportation, services such as Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, CHIP. It goes on and on. So these are things that have real impacts on everyone, really. So the federal funding is certainly a big part of it, and we want to make sure that everyone is counted so that complete funding is available for those programs. But even beyond that, it's for representation. The state of Illinois stands to potentially lose 2 congressional seats if there's an undercount. So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah,
that's huge.
That's a tremendous impact.
Yeah, which means for the next 10 years then that we would not have those seats or that representation across because of this undercount there that potentially happens.
And then as pertains to economic development, there's actually a big impact there as well. So lending institutions and those that are looking at economic development would look at that as well. So if someone was interested in opening a new business or a branch of a franchise or another business, they look at census data.
Yeah.
And as you just said, that data stays the same for 10 years. So when we talk about food deserts and things like that, when a grocery store is looking to open a new location, if there's an area that's undercounted, they're not going to go there because they think there are fewer people there than are actually there. So the impacts are huge.
It is. And that's great. I love that you're able to share that information, and that's really the importance of making sure that these communities are counted, because if we do not receive this data, then again, it is going to determine the resources that will be available.
Absolutely.
You also mentioned a little bit about some of the undercounted or foreign speaking, so immigrants, if you will, that live within the state that should definitely be counted as well. And I know a lot of times there are reservations with them wanting to complete this. Are there any types of backlash or anything like that that can happen because they, are putting down that, maybe I'm not here legally? Is that going to have any effect on them?
Sure. Well, the good news is that the citizenship question was under consideration, but it is not going to be on the census questionnaires.
That's great.
That
That's
should
powerful.
be a relief to many. That's really important to be aware of. So that is something that has been talked about quite a bit. So the first thing to know is that question is not there. But beyond that, anything that is reported on the census is completely confidential. Census Bureau enumerators and staff sign a lifetime pledge to confidentiality. This information is not shared with any other federal agency, not with your landlord. So if you've got more people in your house than are listed on your lease, whatever the case may be, this information is not shared with anyone else. This is strictly for the purposes of completing the census, for the funding, for the representation, and then, as we already discussed, the other organizations that use this data as well.
I love it. I love it. And I think that's paramount a lot for people to understand the importance of completing the census, but also educating to the fact that this is something that is not going to hurt or harm them. It really is going to help in the long run, because again, we'll be able to provide these resources. One of the things I love is that, of course, at the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago, we do strive ourselves on eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, dignity, and freedom for all. And so by being in alignment with the Census 2020, it really falls in line with making sure that we're adhering to that mantra, if you will.
Absolutely.
And being able to provide, continued services for them there.
Absolutely, I agree. It ties in perfectly, and one of the things that has come out of this effort is for us to share with people and to make people understand it's not just your civic duty to complete the census; it's actually a right, something that you should be fighting for. And so, some people are considering it in some ways an act of resistance that you will count me, and that I want to be counted, and I demand to be counted. And so, we're wanting people to be aware of that and make sure that they utilize this right.
I love that. That's a great option to make sure that it's a part of your civil rights.
Absolutely.
That you're considering this. Can you share with the audience as well the actual process of basically counting the census? So it's my understanding that it's a few different stages that happen over the next few months here. So right now what we're hoping to do, of course, is educate the public and those that receive some of our services about the actual process and what we're doing. So they will receive an actual card in the mail, and this year is the first year that the census will be electronic.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Absolutely. The first questionnaires are actually not the questionnaires themselves, but the invitation to complete the questionnaires will be hitting mailboxes this week, in fact, on Thursday, March 12th. So the first wave of questionnaires or invitations to complete the questionnaire will take place between March 12th and 20th.
Okay.
They're not all sent on the same day just to not overload the postal system.
Sure.
So that's wave one. That's the invitation to complete the questionnaire. Most people will get that version, although there are some areas that have been historically undercounted or that do not have as extensive internet connectivity that could potentially receive a paper form to begin with. That's very few, though. It's a very small percentage.
Okay.
So that invitation will let people know that the first choice for completing the questionnaire is online. As Vince mentioned, that this is the first time that people have had the opportunity to complete it that way. They also have the ability to complete the questionnaire via phone. And then the last choice today with the 2020 census is the paper questionnaire. And in fact, most people will not receive the paper questionnaire until several reminder mailings have happened.
Okay.
So as you mentioned, it does take place over a period of time. And going back to your earlier question about the citizenship question about people that may be immigrants that do or don't have citizenship status, an important message that we want to make sure that everyone is aware of is that the best way that you can avoid an enumerator coming to your door and knocking on your door is to complete the census form early and to complete it fully.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Absolutely, because we're well aware that that's something most people want to avoid. So the best way to do that is to complete the census questionnaire. So again, the first one will be an invitation to complete the questionnaire, and then there will be a series of another 4 mailings with those reminders to complete the questionnaire. That's before the actual paper form goes out.
Okay.
So that's kind of the next step in the process. And then once we hit the month of May, that's when enumerators will start knocking on doors. They'll knock on your door at least 6 times before they discontinue that.
Wow.
So for many people, the best thing they can do really is to go ahead and complete that early and accurately.
Absolutely. And so again, those options to complete the census prior to the numerator coming out to the home would be once they received an invitation to do a phone call to complete it, or they can go online and complete it. And I think one of the great things that the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago is doing is that we're enabling those individuals that may not have access to the internet to utilize our facilities. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
To come in to complete that actual census form as long as they have that invitation.
Well, the good news is they don't even have to have the invitation.
No?
So if they've lost that or it got lost in the mail or they left it at home or whatever the case may be, they actually do have the ability to enter their address. And for people that are experiencing homelessness, they have the option to make that known as well. So the questionnaire is very flexible. So the first choice would be to have that personalized invitation code, but even for people who don't, that's no problem. We still want them to complete the census. And as you mentioned, we'll have our locations that will be open, or certain ones of our locations that will be open, so that people can utilize kiosks for internet access if you don't have it, and certainly could use the phone lines as well. So we'll be posting some open hours soon, and we'll also be doing that in conjunction with our Chicago Housing Authority locations as well. So that's some new work that we've taken on recently, and we've got computer labs at every one of those locations that have dozens of computers that will be available. So we want to make sure that people have access to complete the census. And any questions, we've got an entire task force that's working around this. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that all of your questions are answered and that you have access to complete the census.
I love it. I love it. Now, you also mentioned earlier that there's some other undercounted, I'm not sure of the word that you used for that one, populations is what it was.
Sure.
And we're particularly focusing on the LGBTQ community and the homeless. And so do we have, or have you created some partnerships that actually work with that
Absolutely.
help to gain more access to individuals that identify
Yes.
in those populations?
Sure. So we do have a number of subrecipients that we're working with on our grant with the state. So we do have different work that we're doing with the census, although for myself personally, I'm largely focused on the state grant. So we'll talk about that first. But then we also have our Forefront grant, which is not as specific. It actually covers the entire state through a coalition with other YWCA affiliates as well. But for the state grant, the current populations that we're working with, as you mentioned, are the LGBTQ plus community and those experiencing homelessness. So we've got really a great portfolio of subrecipients that we're working with other organizations that serve those populations. For the homeless population, All Chicago, which is the organization that does the point in time count for the city every year in January through HUD. And are actually sending that information to HUD. So they are the de facto experts with those experiencing homelessness, knowing the unsheltered and sheltered, as well as working hand in hand with a broad partnership of those that are part of the continuum of care for homeless. So that's that part of the population that we're working with for our subrecipients. For the LGBTQ plus community, we've got quite a few that we're working with as well, including names that would be familiar to many of you: Howard Brown Health, Center on Halstead, AIDS Foundation, Equality Illinois, LGBT Chamber, and we also are working with La Casa Norte, SGA Youth and Family Services, and Women Justice Institute.
Collaborative partners.
Absolutely. We're very fortunate that we've got a great portfolio of subrecipients that are really working so well together. We've got a number of exciting events coming up. Another thing actually that should be hitting YouTube coming soon or hitting the internet coming soon is a public service announcement that we've put together, which features both the mayor and a number of the subrecipients that we work with. So keep your eyes open for that. We hope you'll be seeing that.
That's great. That's great. All right. So also, I understand that there may be some additional job opportunities that are still available for those that are seeking employment. So how would that apply? Would they also be able to access the website, or are there other ways that they can still get engaged and involved with making sure that their particular areas are counted?
Absolutely. The Census Bureau is working very hard in hiring efforts, which have been a little trickier this time because unemployment is low. But they actually have some great opportunities that are both flexible, and they're really seeking to find people from the actual neighborhoods where they'll be working. Because when people get the knock on their door, they want it to be a face that looks familiar and someone that they trust. And so the Census Bureau is working very hard on that. These are good paying jobs. In Cook County, they pay $29.50 per hour.
Wow,
and there's a lot of flexibility, whether you're a stay-at-home parent or even if you're a working parent that has the ability to work some in the evenings on your own schedule. So this really does tie in quite a bit with the economic empowerment opportunities that we try to make available to those that we serve. So we want to make sure that people know about that and that they take advantage of those opportunities. And there are even opportunities with the subrecipients that we're working with. So there are cases where people will be canvassing there as well and may have opportunities to receive a stipend as a volunteer as part of those efforts.
Outstanding. So I see the huge relevance that and the importance of making sure that you're counted in this arena. Can you share with the listening audience and our viewers, are there any additional items that you feel the census is paramount that you would love to see come from this?
Sure.
Knowing that I think, again, within 10 years, we won't have, we won't be counted again until the year 2030.
Absolutely. I think a few key points that I hope people have as takeaways is that, number one, everyone in your household counts. That means everyone. So there have been times where people
So if I have an in-law or someone like that lives in,
absolutely,
that's moved in,
whether they're related to you or not, if someone's couch surfing and your home is where they're staying right now, then that's the case as well. But children under the age of 5 have been one of the largest undercounted populations. So sometimes there's the perception, maybe it gets a little confused with voting, with things like that. They're under 18, but we need to capture those children under the age of 5.
Absolutely.
A lot of this funding goes to them.
That resources again, and then by the time that 10 years from now, right? So if they're looking at this data to project what resources will be available in 10 years, that child essentially could be a teenager.
Absolutely.
And so therefore, this is in direct relation to that. So the importance
Absolutely.
there.
And as you said, everyone in the household, that's very important. And again, to tie back to something we talked about earlier, which is this information is not shared with anyone else.
Yeah, I think that's
Another
very
key
important.
point is that the online census form allows you to put practically infinitely many people on the questionnaire as far as who all lives in your home. The paper form only allows to go up to 10. So for multi-generational households or for those that have lots of children, you would do better to do the online form because you can complete up to 999 people actually on the census. So
that would definitely make sure everyone's being counted.
Yes, no kidding. So that allows plenty of room there. Another thing that I just wanted to make people aware of from that perspective and things to know is that there is a dual question around race and ethnicity. And this is something that there's been a lot of talk about because there's the potential for confusion.
Absolutely.
So towards the end of the questionnaire, there's a question for the Latinx population, and it asks them to provide what type of Latino, whether they're of Mexican descent, Puerto Rican, other different types of Latinx descent. So that's the first question. But they also need to answer the second question that comes after that, which is the race question. And this is something that could potentially cause confusion. There are 4 main buckets that are included within the race question. It has white and Caucasian, African American, indigenous peoples, different tribal peoples, and then Asian populations. Then there's a place there for other races. And people do have the option to put something else there and write what they feel that they most associate with. So, but what's important for people to know about this question is that if you do put some other race, that will actually be imputed by Census Bureau staff. What that means is that they'll use available data to make a decision of which of those other 4 categories to assign you to. So this is another place that people have their voice, and they need to utilize that and make sure that they answer that question with the way that they most feel comfortable and that they believe that they should be associated.
Absolutely.
That does bring me to 2 other items that have been talked about quite a bit, and that is on gender. There are only 2 options, male and female. So some people are disappointed that there aren't more options there. So
Absolutely.
understand that we hear you, we agree, we hope that this will be different by the 2030 census. There is a small win though, and that is that when it's asking for the makeup of the household, you have the option to include same-sex couple. So even though you don't have the ability to put other options besides male and female, you do have the acknowledgement there of making that known in that area. So hopefully by highlighting some of these different questions that we know could cause confusion or could cause frustration, it will make people know that you do need to be counted. And even though all the options are not there that you would want to see there, put the closest thing that you can, because the most important thing is that you do utilize your right to be counted in the census.
Absolutely. And just for those that may still be confused after even sharing that information, is it still important to not leave it blank at all?
Absolutely.
To make sure that it is counted in there.
And that's one of those things where early on I mentioned that you should complete the census early and complete it fully. So it could prompt a callback from the Census Bureau if you leave something blank.
Yeah.
Or it could prompt an enumerator coming to your door. So do make every effort to fill it out completely to avoid any questions.
Outstanding. Wow. Well, as you can see, a ton of outstanding information, which is why I'm so thankful that you've been able to come on and share with the Economic Empowerment Television and the viewing audience there. As always, you can go to our website at YWCAChicago.org. Again, that's www.ywcachicago.org. And in addition to that, you can see some of our brochures here that talk about our Small Business Development Center and some of the information that we have there. And if you're interested in joining our mailing list to find about more information on some of the initiatives we have, text the word SBDC YWCA to 22828. Again, that's SBDC YWCA to 22828. Regan Sonnabend, Vice President of Marketing at the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago and Director of the Census. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and sharing outstanding information with the viewing audience. I hope you join us again in some of the future shows, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.